Oh, yeah.
Yeah, today they filed for bankruptcy. Yeah, they've been around forever.
Yes. Nice to meet you. Yeah, and this is,
Hasn't happened yet. Work issue.
sure. Yeah. I haven't fiddled with anything since last week. Yeah.
Not yet. It's hard to tell yeah, it's just kind of crazy.
Hello. How are you doing over there?
Yeah, I mean, like birthday dish.
Does anybody know if we're all here?
Start on time, whether here or not.
A pretty full table, and we're at 5 o'clock. So if we're all ready to get started, I don't know who calls to order based on this agenda.
You're welcome to.
Well, I guess I will call this meeting to order. I'm not used to having that level of power when I come to a municipal meeting. So because there's a planning commission forum for Honeybrook Township, this was a publicly advertised meeting, so we have an agenda to follow that the township pulled together. Announcements. So I'll just read off the agenda, but we do have, the township has listening devices for anybody who needs assistance with hearing. There's rules of conduct for public meetings. I don't know.
It's attached to the agenda.
Okay. It's,
Where can we get a copy of that?
there were a couple up front.
Yes.
Yeah, that wasn't in the packet. We got
No,
that.
they're up here. Do you
They're
need
here.
Yeah. I'll get you a copy.
I didn't pick that up.
Okay, I'll get you one, Gary.
Sorry. Made 2 copies. Do that.
Please. Um, And then the third announcement, so the rules of conduct is attached to the back of this agenda. And then just informing you that Scott Stilson from Vincent Drive is recording tonight's meeting for YouTube. I also am hooked up to Zoom for anybody who joins virtually to this meeting. And the plan is to hold these meetings hybrid going forward. So if anybody can't attend in person, they can hop on Zoom. And then that brings us to new business. So the following agenda should follow the agenda that I sent out for the task force meeting. But I'm assuming everybody is aware, but this is the kickoff for the Honeybrook Township and Borough Comprehensive Plan update. So this is the first task force meeting of that comprehensive plan update. Just to kind of go through general agenda items, we'll have, and we might shift the agenda around a little bit, because we are expecting Janine Spears, who's just running a little bit late, but she is the Vision Partnership Program representative from Chester County, who will be sitting in, just monitoring, making sure we follow the contract and scope that was agreed upon, contingent on the Vision Partnership funding that we received for this project. So she will give a little overview of the grant guidelines. Then we'll go through project overview, go through the scope, discuss some initial things just to solidify the process as we go forward. And then we'll get to questions and concerns. So the one thing, we'll go around and do introductions. I know a few of you, but a few of you are new faces. So if you don't mind, and I also don't know how many of you know the folks from the township versus the borough. So if you don't mind, we'll go around. I'll start introductions. So my name is Sarah Sharp. I am the manager for, assistant manager for municipal assistance at Multi-Municipal Conservancy. And I will be the project lead for this project. I will kick it off to Grant, and then we can go around the circle doing introductions. And after Grant, we'll just hop over to our friends from the county to do introductions as well. But go ahead, Grant.
Good evening. Conservancy, which includes our municipal assistance program. We have a joint leadership structure at the Conservancy, so I am actually the co-director of the Conservancy. But once again, for the purposes of tonight and the task force and this project, I'm the Director of Community Services. So.
Janine, we're going to kick over to you.
Janine Spears, Chester County Planning Commission. Sorry, I just left the office and had to run here. I am a senior community planner. I've been with the Planning Commission for a long time. And I actually worked with Honeybrook Borough years and years and years ago on projects, so it's nice to work with you all.
William Peters for Chester County Planning Commission, community planner as well. This is my first time coming to Honeybrook, and I'm excited to be here listening to involved.
Steve Longnecker, I represent Park and Rec Board, or Rec and Park as we say here in the township. I'm a resident of the township for 5.5 years. I also work for Natural Lands Conservancy, that works essentially with Greenway Conservancy.
My name is Sandy Cooper, and I'm on Borough Council. I'm a 26-year resident of the Borough of Honeybrook. I'm glad to be here to participate.
Matt Halverson, Mayor of Honeybrook Borough.
Greg Neese, I'm a resident of the borough, a recent resident. also manage an insurance office there in the borough. And so all the new residents in the borough here, we've been managing the office since 1999, so.
Sal Jonathan, Township Supervisor.
Erin Hamel, I'm on the planning commission and lifelong resident, and we also have a business and farm attached.
I'm Liz Needles. I have been in Huntington for 24 years now. I'm on the planning commission here. And then I also work for a municipality, East Stratford. So I feel very much.
I'm Susan Lacy, I'm on the Township Planning Commission and Land Preservation Committees. I've lived in Huntington for 21 years, and I think I'm the only person who was on the last Brook Borough and Township Joint Comprehensive Plan.
I'm not sure about that. What was the thing we did? That was zoning. I was getting confused. I'm Gary McEwen, I'm on the planning commission, been a resident, Huntington Township for about 4 years.
Okay, so then the next thing on our agenda, and let me just make sure, yeah. So I'm gonna.
Hello. Can you guys speak up? It's really hard to hear back here. Warren, is the audio turned up?
It is on.
We do have speakers on, so just make sure the green light is on the speakers on the table. And then just speak towards the speaker. And speak up, so everybody can hear. Okay, so I'm gonna kick it over to Janine to go over the county grant guidelines for the Vision Partnership Program. So we can make sure we're staying on task and in guidance with the grant that we received for this project.
How do you all want me to do this so I can be heard? Should I stand up or?
We give everyone
No, here, I can take the, yeah, I'll just take that. If you want to speak at the podium.
So I'm going to go over the contract, and as Sarah said, Sarah and I have worked on many other contracts as a grant line, so it's good to be working with you all. Basically, why we do this is because I've been at this a long time, and if you don't go over the contract, then about halfway through the process, people are wondering what the scope is, what the contract is, what we're doing here, how long it's going to take, all of that. So we've incorporated something called the initial briefing meeting into our contracts, where we have everybody has to stay awake. This will be your test to see your fortitude in this process. Everybody has to stay awake during a couple minutes, maybe 10 minutes of going through the contract. The first thing in the contract is there is what I call a cheat sheet, and it looks like this. It's the first page, and it is 1 through 10 bullet items, and it basically is a summary and your cliff notes of the main items in the contract. I'm going to run through these main items quickly, and then I will run through a couple key pertinent points of the contract itself.
And I only printed out a couple copies of the contract because it's pretty hefty to make 15 copies. But I also have it on the screen for people to follow along as well. And I did email the contract out to you all. So if you need to reference it in the future, it was included in the packet that I emailed out. But what you have in front of you is just the scope of work. So minus the contract, other than the 3 copies that I passed out.
So what's on the screen is what I call the cliff note sheet, and it's basically the cheat sheet of some of the highlights of the contract. Again, Jean Spears, I'm going to be the grant monitor, and Louis Rodriguez is a brand new planner. The Planning Commission really excited to have him join us, and he's effectively going to be shadowing me and monitoring. So you might see him at meetings, you might see me at meetings, you might see both of us at meetings. We're kind of co-monitoring. And by the way, what that means, I'll just say, it's in the contract, but I'll say it anyway. What it means to be the grant monitor is, this is I guess it's a 4-party contract in this case. It's the township, borough, county, and conservancy enter into an agreement together, and the planning commission is the agency for the county of Chester that's in charge of this grant program. So a planner from our office is assigned to sit in on the meetings, sit in on the contract, effectively make sure the scope is being followed, make sure the terms of the grant is being followed. If you have any questions for the county about the grant program, about a contract, about if you want us to provide other resources in our office through other planners or questions, we can do all of that. And effectively, it's called a grant monitor, which sounds ominous, and it's not meant to sound ominous. We're a non-voting member of the task force, so we're basically here to just make sure everything stays on track. So at the end of the process in 2 years, instead of, oh my gosh, there's problems, those problems hopefully, if there's problems, which there won't be, I'm sure, then they can be addressed along the way, and where there are no problems, you finish your project and everybody can tell them their lives. So this, under the cheat sheet you're seeing, the initial briefing meetings that we're having right now, that's where we go over the contract. There is a line item after this, so I'm not going to go over this in the agenda. We're going to talk about who your task force chair is and how your task force is going to work. I just went over what it needs to be a grant monitor, review of materials. The Conservancy will prepare materials. We'll send the materials out approximately a week in advance. And everybody, including CCBC, will have an opportunity to comment on those materials. Invoices. There's a specific invoicing process that I'll go over when we go through the details of the contract, but this is a reimbursable grant. So the township and the borough will be responsible to pay the invoices, and then at the end of the project, after the plan is adopted and it goes through the whole process, then there will be a reimbursement process. Interim briefing meetings, we have those specifically in the contract in case there's a hiccup in the contract. So it's an official way for you to halt on the project in terms of the contract, and not in terms of, you know, one off and just say, let's just talk, we all need to talk, whatever's going on. And sometimes we've had those interim briefing meetings being with the township and the borough saying, hey, we would really like to add X, Y, and Z to the contract. Is there a way we can do that when we amend the contract? So it doesn't have to be like a negative thing. It could be a positive, you know, to halt the contract and talk about it. The vision partnership, grant review, and 247 review. So at the end of this process, how it works is when the township and borough are ready and the project, the plan is in pretty good shape, pretty much a final draft form, you would send the product through the Conservancy to me for something called grant review. And I look over the terms of the grant, the scope of work, et cetera, to make sure that the final product meets the scope of the grant. To streamline that process under the municipality's planning code to adopt the comp plan, you would also have to send the comp plan to the county for Act 247 review. So instead of having the grant process be a separate review process and then the Act 247 process would be a separate review process, the county has streamlined those, have those be run the process. So whenever you're ready for that process, you send it in to the grant review and the 247 process together. But that means the plan is going to have to be in final form, or else you might have to redo the 247 review process. And Sarah, I'm going to talk to you more about that. That's usually not something anybody wants to do, so just to throw that out there. Adoption is needed for grant reimbursement. That is a condition of the contract. And then, as I said, number 9, it is a reimbursable grant. And number 10, there is an opportunity for contract extensions. How contract extensions work, this is a 2-year contract. For all of our comprehensive plan contracts, they're all 2 years, just because it's easier to have a set time frame, and generally it takes at least 2 years to do the comp plans. Even if people think it's going to take less time, it rarely does. There's an opportunity to get 2 grant extensions if you need them. There's 6-month extensions. And you would ask for an extension a couple months before the end of the contract, so everybody's prepared. Get an extension 1 at a time, 2-month extensions. There is an opportunity to have the contract extended for a total of 2 years, but really nobody exercises that opportunity. Usually 1 or 2 6-month extensions is enough. And it's usually for the adoption process. Sometimes that can take extra time. So everybody's still awake, so that's good. So I'm going to go to the general conditions section of the contract, which is the first page of the proper contract proper. As I said, it's a 4-party contract in this case. Appendix A includes what the responsibilities of the county, the consultant, and then the municipalities are. And then there's Appendix B, and that's the scope of work. Sarah will go over that after I'm done. The lead planner for the project is Sarah, and if the lead planner would change, the Conservancy knows to contact the county and just let us know if the Conservancy and the task force select a different lead planner for the project. The next page of the contract is the total project is $70,000. The county award is for 60% of that amount, and that's $42,000. And then both municipalities are paying 40% of that, and that's $28,000. Our grant program is a 60-40 grant program, so that aligns to how the grant program does work. This timeframe of the contract is April 1st this year until March 31st of 28, I guess. It's a 3-year contract. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
It's a 2-year contract, so, okay, you already got an extra year time. I must have misread that before, so I apologize. As I said, the contract can be amended by written agreement of all parties, and the contract can be terminated. That does happen in rare instances, but sometimes it's necessary, and the contract can be terminated. Moving on to the next page, which is page 3 of the contract. Adoption of the plan is absolutely necessary for reimbursement to happen. And Sarah can run through what that means exactly. And I already ran through what the time extensions are and how that works. For the payment and compensation, it's important, we've already gone through this, because the Conservancy has already submitted one invoice, and thank you for doing a great job. But so everybody understands how the payments and invoices occur, is the Conservancy creates an invoice, sends the invoice to me and Lewis as the grant monitors, as well as the representatives in the borough and the township, and then we approve, the county approves the invoices, and then after the invoices are approved, the township and the borough looks at the invoices as well to make sure that the invoices are okay on their end. And after that point, then the Conservancy gets paid for the invoices. There's a specific way to do the invoices, and the Conservancy has done them that way. And it's basically, for the good of the order, it's invoicing by task. So everybody knows how much each task is going to cost, and then what part of that task has been completed, what percentage remains, and then breaking that down also in terms of how much each task costs and how much money is left on each task. At the end of the project, and before the Vision Partnership Grant review is done, and before the Act 247 review is done, part of the contract is the 10% of the amount of the project fee is retained. So the borough and the township would withhold the final 10% until that final Vision Partnership Grant review is completed, and until that 247 review is completed. And then the reimbursement process, there is a packet on our website that is part of the grant manual for this particular grant, and the township and the borough will be responsible for filling out the reimbursement paperwork to go through the process with the county. Then moving on to the Appendix A, which, as I said, is the standard articles of agreement, and that goes through the responsibilities of the municipalities, the county, and the consultants. I'm just going to go through more of the responsibilities of municipalities, and then if there's any different responsibilities of the county and the consultant, I'll highlight those, because basically it's a repeat 3 times of the responsibilities. For the municipality, obviously work with the CCPC and Brandon Rec Conservancy to achieve consistency with the scope of work, and with Landscapes 3, which is the county's comprehensive plan, Adhering to the policy of the county comprehensive plan is why the county commissioners have this grant program in the first place. So that is an element of the grant program. Obviously, we apply provisions of the grant manual, establish the project task force that you have, and I know you're going to talk about that on your next agenda item. This is the initial briefing meeting to go over the contract. Number 5, you're going to arrange, I assume that the next agenda item, you're also going to talk about arranging and scheduling time and place for regular meetings and how that will work. Another element of being municipal representatives is to review and comment on material provided by the Conservancy. Obviously, if they're producing material and they don't really receive any comments, they don't know the direction to go in with that material. So it's important, if you love the material, just make sure they know that that is the material, you're good to go with the material so they can move on to the contract and, meet their obligations. The Planning Commission, through Lewis and I, might have some comments, and we will provide you those comments. And just to respond to those comments and talk dialogue on those comments, just like you would on any other materials produced. Provide advance notice if your meetings are going to change, just so Lewis and I know, CCPC knows that the meetings are going to change. So we can attend as many of the meetings as possible. We've already talked about the adoption and the reimbursement. Going on to the consultant's responsibilities, obviously complete the tasks in the Appendix A, the scope of work that Sarah's going to go over, and let me know or Lewis know of any changes in the project schedule or the scope of materials. Another consultant responsibility would be submit the materials to you all in the county approximately a week before the task force meeting, just so that everybody has an opportunity to comment on the material and come to the meeting prepared. There's nothing like, getting a thick packet at the meeting and not really being able to respond to it. And then basically the consultant would attend the scheduled task force work sessions and work with you all to work through the product. Last but not least, the county's responsibilities that are different than any of the other ones. As I said before, monitor the progress of the scope of work and the contract, look at the agendas and draft materials and comment on them as needed. I don't think Lewis and I will be commenting on every single aspect. It's more of just making sure the contract's running smoothly and obviously adhering to the scope of work under the county policy. Provide any kind of updates on the mission partnership grant program as needed or the contract. As I said before, make available other planning commission staff. If you have transportation questions, for example, we could talk to our transportation planners and help that some of that information for you. And then, as I said, one big responsibility for the county is at the end, do the review for the grant review at the very end of the project. Look at the comp plan, make sure it adheres consistent with county policy, consistent with the scope of work, and what was said was going to be done has been done. And then the 247 review process also. Does anybody have any questions of me? Yes.
You referenced other items that we may need, say transportation consultant. Is that included in the price, or is that in addition to if we need additional resources and want to look at different?
If you need technical assistance on some aspect of the comp plan, the County Planning Commission has planners with all different types of expertise, transportation planners, environmental planners, water sewer planners. And so we could make those planners available to answer your questions or to work through some items. It wouldn't be a consulting situation. The Conservancy is your consultant, period, that's it. It's more if you want some technical assistance or just helping vet some information or some brainstorm some information or maybe some more detailed information that would help the Conservancy's process, then we can make those plans available, and it's no additional cost.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. It's exciting to be working with you all. I haven't been working with the Honeybrooks in a while, so this will be fun. So thank you.
Thank you.
So that brings us to the next agenda item. which is election of a task force chair, and then municipal liaisons, which basically a representative from each municipality, so that I have a point person if, we're collecting comments and they all come through one person, or I need to disseminate information quickly, you can kind of send stuff to your various committees and that kind of thing. So, and then we do have on here secretary. I do take notes, or we have a staff member usually attending. We tag team in meetings to take notes, but if one of you are really eager to document the meeting and take notes, happy to delegate to a secretary as well. Task force chair, municipal point person, liaison, secretary if anybody wants to take that on. And then I do want to address how the task force would like to handle public comment, whether it's we hold time. I know the township holds time at the beginning of the meeting for public comment, or if we want to hold time at the end of a meeting for public comment. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that. So I'll turn it over to all of you to decide who you want your task force chair to be.
Who wants it? Somebody's got to want it.
Gary,
There.
you know what?
Well, what, shouldn't it be, like, can it be an employee of the township? Like, can it be township manager or borough manager? Only because that person's got more time to disseminate information.
Well, so task force chair will essentially just make sure that the meeting, stays on track, throughout the meeting. Municipal liaison would be the person that I'm working with to disseminate information, send stuff out. I have all your emails, so I send stuff out, but if there's anything I need to connect with the township or borough on outside of sending meeting materials, that kind of thing, just having a point person at the borough or township identified. So that's what that municipal liaison would be. And then the task force chair makes sure we stay on task, on topic. You open the meeting, you close the meeting, make sure we're running smoothly.
Who makes the agenda?
I do.
You want it, Gary?
Yeah.
I'll make that motion, Gary McEwen, I need
I
chair.
can do that part of it. I was just worried about the workload of sending stuff out at the time. I can't be responsible for that.
We will take that task on. So we have a motion. Okay.
Second.
All right. Well, congratulations.
And I can get kicked off if I'm not doing a good job.
I guess so. never had that happen.
That's your motion. I'm not effective, somebody else has.
So there is a loophole in this if anybody wants to dethrone our chairman. Is there anybody who would like to be the municipal liaison? I mean, I've been working with Warren mostly, and Matt, you as well. But if there's anybody else who kind of wants to be involved in sending stuff out.
I'd be happy to be the borough.
Okay, great. And Warren, are you still okay with being the point person?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Do we need to make motions on this stuff?
We can,
I'll make a motion, Sandy Hooper be the municipal liaison.
for
For the borough.
I'll second.
Great. And do we have a motion for the township?
I'll make a motion for Warren.
Okay,
I'll second.
awesome. And then the last question is, we're happy to take meeting notes and send them out with the agenda, but if there's anybody who really wants to be the secretary, that would be an additional workload, but we're happy to take that on as part of us just collecting your insights and information. I think that's fine.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome. It's honestly my least favorite part of the job, but it's helpful for us to be able to compile all that. So the last thing is if anybody has preferences on how to handle public comment during our meetings, if we want to have time at the beginning of the agenda or the end of the agenda.
The only thing I'd say, at the borough, our meetings, we have a meeting first and third Monday of the month. We have public comment at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting.
At both?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
What's the most effective? Would it be better to allow for the comment? I hear both, but I worry about length of the meeting. Would it be more effective to go through the agenda and then, or have the public comment section be at the next meeting based on what was at the previous meeting? What's the most effective?
At the end, put it as a public thing.
I think at the beginning and the end.
I agree, I think the beginning and the end, there's already a time limit on what, the amount you can say anything, so.
I'm fine with both.
Okay, so full disclosure, we typically, when we work with municipalities, we don't get anybody from the public engaging. So, we have opportunity throughout the meetings to, when there is someone from the public, we're usually pretty excited or surprised by that. So, it'll be an exciting process to actually have public attend task force meetings. So yeah, happy to, that's why we didn't have a process in place, because typically nobody shows up. So yeah, happy to do both. So I'll make sure that the agendas going forward reflect, a specific time for that. But making sure that we also make sure we have time to actually address the items, the meat of what we need to discuss for the agenda. Okay, so that brings us to going through the scope of work, which I did print out for you. I was trying to be judicious with my paper use, because sometimes meeting packets can snowball, and before you know it, you have a stack, and then you leave the meeting and you have a stack to stick on your desk at home or wherever. So when I send out the next meeting packet, depending on how big the different documents are, I might indicate which ones I plan to print out at the next meeting and which ones I am not planning on printing out unless one of you request it. So I'm happy to print out things for you all if you request a specific document, but if you see that I'm not planning on printing something out because it's, 10 plus pages, but you want that, just shoot me an email and I can make sure I print out for people who request specific documents. But I'll make sure to let you know in advance. That way, if you want to bring a document and you want to bring your laptop or another device to look at it on, but you don't need a printed copy, that way you know in advance that you need to prepare for that. And I will generally be using the screen. So I know sometimes it's nice to go through something at your own pace during a meeting. So again, if you need that, I'm happy to provide that. So I will bring up the scope of work again. Like I said, it is in front of you. But I also have it here. And apologies for the quick scroll. And I'm just going to do a quick high-level overview of this, really focusing on the task force meetings that are outlined in that kind of give a good outline of the process and what topics we'll be covering throughout the project. And then I'll focus a little bit more on the timeline, which I did print out separately for you. It's folded up in the back because it's a long thing and it gets small and hard to read. So we can go over the schedule as well. But these are kind of the general deliverables, tasks. We have a project administration section. That's pretty straightforward, talking about kickoff, making sure we're doing meeting agendas, invoices, kind of all the things that keep the project going. We did include in the scope a project website. In the past, it all depends on the individual municipality's preference, but in the past, we often will host just a project website on our conservancy website, and then we can put different updates about the project on there, specific materials, agendas, that kind of thing, announcements about public meetings, surveys, and we can put that all up on our website. If the borough and township then want to link off to that, or sometimes townships and boroughs prefer to just have their own project website posted on their webpage. So it's up to you. We're happy to host one that you both can link off to. That way you have all the same information. But if you have individual project pages that you're planning on managing, I can send materials to you in advance to put on that.
Do we need to tell you that now?
You can, or you can tell me later.
Yeah, we'll bring it up the next council meeting, but
Okay.
yeah, I just wrote a note on it, so.
Okay, and it's simple enough to throw a little blurb on your website with a link to our webpage. And would the township want to do this?
We'll link to yours.
Okay. So we will make sure to have a project web page up and running for the next meeting, and have material populated for the next meeting. So that's project administration. Then we'll get into the task force meetings later, but this project is a set number of task force meetings that are budgeted for. There will also be public meetings and a public hearing at the end. So the public hearing is for adoption of the plan. So both I think it would likely be the borough holds their own public hearing for adoption of the plan, separate from the township. They have been done jointly before as well, so you could hold a joint public hearing of your board of supervisors and your council, where we open it up for public comment. It's the same thing for public hearings. We just follow the same public hearing process, or they can happen jointly at already scheduled either council or supervisors meeting, but we can figure out the details of that. That's at the very end when we're ready to adopt, and we've gone through the county review, and it's usually pretty straightforward, but just so you all know what the process will look like going forward, and you can kind of think about how you want to handle that. So I will get into the different task force meetings towards the end and the public meetings, but basically the process starts off with existing conditions inventory, data collection. We're currently working on pulling demographic information. We'll, after this meeting, kick off the mapping component where we're mapping all of the different resources in both the township and borough, just so we have a full picture of what's going on now and what has happened in the past. There will also be a review of relevant plans and studies. So obviously, as an update to the 2015 plan, we'll be reviewing that. We've already started doing that. And then any other relevant plans. So obviously, we'll be looking at Landscapes 3 and some of the other plans that surround the borough. So other municipal plans to make sure we're consistent with all the past planning documents. So that's the existing conditions, and that will be used to inform some of the decision-making process going forward. Like I said, there will be 2 public meetings. So the first one is what we call a community visioning session. Typically we hold these, it's kind of like an open house style meeting where we ask the public to come, provide input. We usually have a lot of maps printed out. We'll have different questions that they can respond to in that open house format, some Post-it notes, stickers, an interactive way for the public to engage. So we'll hold that, and that usually corresponds with the community values survey. So we'll also do a survey. In the scope, we did identify using SurveyMonkey, but also distributing paper surveys. Since you all have a significant plain sect population, we wanted to make paper surveys available for anybody who wouldn't be interacting with the web-based survey. So we'll start talking about what kind of questions we want to ask the public. I think that will be at our next meeting, but that kind of runs consecutively with the community visioning session. Sometimes people come to that public meeting, that first visioning session, and haven't done the survey yet, so sometimes it's nice to extend the survey so they hear about it at that meeting, they can go home and take the survey. We can have paper copies available of the survey then, and then we usually have a deadline, so then we have time to compile all the information, and we'll present the findings from that survey and the public visioning session to you all.
What part of the process does that happen? I know you said that at the second meeting, you start to answer the questions. When does that, how far into the process does a visioning session take place?
So the timeline that I printed out, which was in this, yeah, so that would be likely September. Now that we are talking about the timeline a little bit, full disclosure, I am expecting my first child in September. So September 7th is when I would be due. So this timeline might shift a little bit depending on how things are going. We do at the Conservancy take a team approach. So Grant is here today, but we have another community planner or lead planner who will be involved the whole process. She just happens to be sick today, Beth Burns, so she will be at every single meeting with me, and then we also have Assistant Director of Municipal Assistance and Community Services, Rob Daniels, who will also hop in as needed to cover my absence this fall. So like I said, the visioning session, depending on when that falls and when we decide the cadence of the task force meetings, looking at the schedule, we might have to be a little bit flexible with that. And I'll talk to my team to see if I need to be there and we need to make contingencies for that.
Like September, October, is what it looks
Yeah,
like.
yeah. And the survey would be kicking off. You can see that gray section, the community value survey. We can release it before the meeting to give people a chance, but really at the next meeting, we'll just be discussing what questions we want to include in that community value survey so we can get it up and running online and then print it out and prepped for the meeting and then going forward. So that is the community value survey. Newsletter articles, we can develop content as needed for your municipal newsletters. Just let us know the cadence of those newsletters. And if you want us to write a little blurb about what a comp plan is, what stage in the process we are, updates like that for your newsletters, we're happy to do that. And have that factored into the scope. And then as part of this process, as you've seen in the 2015 plan, we'll develop vision statement, goals, and objectives through this process. Those are kind of the foundational elements of this plan, and then the recommendations that will live in the appendix and kind of are those tasks that are identified. Those will all be supporting the vision, where you want to see the township and borough going, what things you would like to accomplish through this plan. And then just to talk a little bit more about, and we will talk about this is the next agenda item, so I'll just briefly provide an overview. So this plan, we're proposing to do a key issue format. So we're really honing in on key elements that we think are most relevant to the township and borough, and trying to really hone in on those items and then maybe do a light update for some other elements of the 2015 plan that might not need as much of a deep dive. So I'll discuss at the next agenda item what we're proposing those key issues to be and how they line up with the previous plan. So you can see most of the previous plan funnels into those key issues anyways, but it just enables us to really hone in on what matters to the township and borough. And then we usually put a lot of information in the appendix so that the comprehensive plan that you have, instead of it being, which your old plan was pretty streamlined as well, but we've worked with municipalities that their comprehensive plan is like a 300-page document, and you really have to sift through to get to what you're wanting to implement. So a lot of that information that is background information, setting the stage, that will all live in the appendix so that when you're pulling out the comp plan in 2 years, you can look up a section that is relevant to you or look up the strategies and get right to what you want to implement. So it's just trying to get things a little bit more streamlined and that we're not printing out a huge document that will sit on the shelf and nobody opens. Trying to organize it in a more usable way. So there's a There are other sections that might not fit into this key issue. So if there's anything that we haven't identified that we're going to really hone in on, we can identify any other sections from the last plan that you would like to see focused on or updated or reviewed. But like I said, most of the elements from the last plan still fit in some way into the key issues. It's just, it'll be a little lighter on certain elements. And then another section we'll get to on the agenda is discussing stakeholder interviews, who we want to talk to on an individual basis, or if there's a group of people that we would like to talk to about certain topics relevant to the plan. So I have a general list identified, but for instance, for the open space section, talking to land trusts. We have a few represented at the table already, but if there are any specific people that you think would be relevant to discuss, so we'll get to that. I have a list, a draft list, but it's more just a brainstorming list, so I'll get your input on that before we start reaching out to folks. And then we finish with a draft comprehensive plan, and then we'll review that. And at the end of this, the goal is to have a final comprehensive plan adopted by both the Board of Supervisors for the township and Borough Council. So I have that outlined. So the task force meetings, and this is where we can kind of talk about schedule and then talk about cadence of the task force meetings. So we're at meeting number 1. So in the scope, if you ever want to reference or see what's coming next, this is a general outline. Like I said, some things might move around. There might be a little bit of fluidity with this, just depending on schedules and timing. So if you all are willing to be flexible, but we're at the project kickoff, the next meeting, we have some goals, themes that we're planning on discussing. So once we've solidified the key issues, this is just the proposed meeting schedule. So we're proposing having 8 meetings with 2 flexible topic meetings. So we have 8 meetings outlined here, but if we need to add another meeting at some point in the process or at the end, if you want a little bit more time to review the documents, we need a little bit more time to digest a certain topic. We have 2 additional meetings that don't currently have anything assigned to them. So those can be used at any point if we, need to do a little bit more discussion and have a little bit more time to review things. And then, so those are the task force meetings. I won't go through the full, what we're covering at each one. But then we have the public participation section. Like I said, 2 public meetings. The first one is the visioning session. The second public meeting happens, so the first public meeting happens early on in the process because we want to hear from the public early on so we can incorporate their feedback into the plan as we go forward. The second public meeting is towards the end, once we've had a draft plan, so that we can present that plan to the public. That typically happens at a planning commission meeting. So it's a presentation of key elements of the plan. We won't go through the full document, but it'll be a high-level overview of that plan. And it'll be held at one joint meeting between the borough and the township planning commission. So it's a presentation to the planning commission as well as a public meeting so that we can elicit feedback from both the township and borough planning commissions as well as the public on the proposed plan. And then once that happens, it typically is sent off if we don't hear significant feedback, if the plan is in a pretty good place, then we can send it off to the supervisors and the borough council, and that's when we'll get into the Act 247 review process. We'll send it to the county to do their vision partnership program review, as well as the Act 247. That kicks off the public comment period, and then we can get into that formalized adoption process. But that last public meeting kind of is the kickoff to that, and kicking off that public comment period. And then we already discussed the public hearing, so that will happen at the very end of the process. Once we've received feedback from the public, once we've had a public comment period, which is typically 45 days at least, so that the public can comment, the county provides their comments during that period. We also send the plan to surrounding municipalities and the school district to make sure that they're on board with the plan and have an opportunity to review anything. And then once we've gotten all the comments, received all of them, incorporated the ones, the relevant comments that we want to incorporate into the plan, then we have the public hearing, and that's an opportunity one last time to receive public comment and then recommend the adoption of the plan. So that's kind of the process from start to finish. The scope then goes on to identify a little bit more the other public process, but I already talked about the stakeholder interviews, the community value survey, the newsletter, and then we have a section on the final product. So that kind of brings me to wanting to discuss the meeting schedule. Typically, we like to set, so this schedule that you have in the back, this kind of outlines all of the tasks and kind of where they happen in the project and how they overlap. But I want to set kind of a general cadence for when these task force meetings will take place, both the date, if it's every third Thursday, whatever it is. We're meeting, I guess it's the first Wednesday. This meeting was scheduled just to get something on the schedule, but if this day doesn't work, I already received feedback that starting the meeting a little bit later would be helpful, as people transition from their work lives to their volunteer lives. So I'm open if anybody has another date that they would like to suggest, or another day of the month they would like to suggest, and then timing, if starting at 6:30 works or 7. I'm open to suggestions.
We have one member here from the Hampton Borough who's not here, they asked to start the meetings a little later.
A little later. Is 7 too late? Is 6:30? Basically, when is a good time to start? Understanding when is a good time to end.
Those that not here, I asked like 5:36, he works till 5.
5:36, okay.
Most of our meetings typically start at 7.
Okay.
So we're kind of accustomed to
To
the 7 o'clock.
Do
How long
you,
do your meetings run typically?
My goal is usually an hour and a half meeting, but that's a goal and not usually how long. They usually run longer, so I would say probably on average it'll be a 2-hour meeting. By 2 hours, I think everybody's, a little tapped out and ready to wrap things up. So,
I personally would prefer 6 o'clock.
Okay.
So that we're wrapping up by 8. My bedtime's
okay.
at 9. Sprinkles is there or not?
Yeah.
Sal, do you expect that the work sessions, that you'll continue to have work sessions or not continue to have work sessions for the supervisors? Because that would happen on this night.
Towards the end, when we get into the budget season, that's September, October, November?
Yeah, so Sarah, the township has 2 budget workshops,
Okay,
September and October. It's the first Wednesday at 7 p.m.
okay. I created an entire calendar that had all of the public meetings. So which dates?
September and October.
Okay,
The first Wednesday of the month
okay.
at 7 p.m.
Does first Wednesday work for you folks at the borough?
Yes.
How it works for us, doesn't it?
So other than the September and October date. So if we want to stick with the first Wednesday, we can always just plan on in September and October picking a different day of the month to meet, if a task force meeting falls then.
Do you have, are there any times where you skip a month because of whatever it is you're working on?
Yeah, we do have a couple months that skip, so based on this timeline, like I said, it is a little bit, it can be flexible, but we're July, so then we have a meeting in August, and then skip September or hold the community, the first public meeting, which doesn't have to happen at the same time as you typically have the task force meetings. Sometimes we like to look at making sure nothing's going on with a school board meeting or other community events, to make sure that there aren't other conflicts. So September currently is proposed to skip, and then November we'd have a meeting. So, or no, that's October. But we can always shift that meeting as well, so.
Well, if that September falls in line with what you got going on, maybe it'd be just beneficial to everyone, maybe just skip September, just kind of plan that now, say skip September.
Okay,
This
yeah.
might kind of helps you on your plate too.
Yep. So yeah, we have currently, and then, again, this calendar was created before we had an initial task force date scheduled. So as you can, I'm just looking at this now, month 6. So if we're starting July, August, September, October, November. Task force meeting 4 would fall in December. If we're doing the first Wednesday, that might not be a conflict, but sometimes, it's hard to pull people together during the holiday season. We should be safe being early on in December, but like I said, we might come up against some of those types of conflicts where it just doesn't make sense scheduling wise, and we can always push a meeting forward or pull it back as needed. But yeah, we can skip September, which would eliminate one of the conflicts with the workshop, budget workshop.
Are we in agreement with the 6? Did everyone feel you guys are good with that? Is anybody
More early for me.
6:30?
6:30? Okay.
So all the meetings unless otherwise noted would be 6:30.
So going forward, unless we have a conflict, there might be a conflict in October, but we can pivot for that meeting. We'll do 6:30 on the first Wednesday of the month, just sticking with that. Does that work with everyone?
And is here okay all the time? Did you guys work that out? I know when we did the zoning update, we did have a couple of meetings in the borough, but
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Warren before, you guys got it on YouTube and everything, I think it works best here, if you guys are okay with it.
Okay. Cool. So that was all I wanted to discuss. The last thing, in this section, so we have an initial base map developed. It's really an update of the layout from the last plan. But I just wanted to get your input, thoughts on this base map. I know there are a lot of little roads in the borough and township. Sometimes we don't map all of the roads, so we can always take some of these roads off to make it a little bit easier to read, but we just wanted to get your feedback on this. This will serve as the base map for all of the other resource maps that we develop. So whether that's natural resources, land use, all of that. So if anybody has any feedback, if you want to not map all of the tiny roads, if we feel like we need to pull the borough out and have a little inset, we can do that. So this is just an initial mock-up. And wanted to hear your thoughts.
I think the borough map looks a little small. I think one and a half would be helpful.
I agree. We'll leave it in an overview,
Yeah.
but have its own separate
So
map.
it could be bigger, yeah.
Yep. Now, would you want a separate map for the borough, or like, sometimes you have inset maps in a corner?
We just do separate?
A separate map, okay?
Do we need to have all this little writing with the numbers and the?
We
is it
don't.
Key points for something, or?
So they are keyed to roads. So sometimes when there are a lot of little roads that you can't fully get a label on, we do these numbered, the number keys, but we can also basically set a threshold for, here, let me pull the map up on the screen. We can set a threshold for how little of a street that we label. So we can always take the
Just looks a little-
labels.
Makes it look a little busy.
Yeah.
Just my opinion.
What kind of format is this done in? Is it possible that if you blow it up, like if somebody's on their computer and blows it up, that it will go to the streets? And then when you put it back down to the size that it is there, that the streets come back in the list?
So this, it's like a static, it's just a PDF, and the way it will be presented in the plan will be a static. So you can zoom in, like it's a high enough resolution that you can zoom in and see detail, like it doesn't get fuzzy. So you can see all these little roads, but it's not dynamic in the way that like Google Maps would be, where if you zoom in, you can start seeing more and more detail, because it's formatted for printing out, as opposed to living on the web. So we can set a threshold and say like, under a certain length, these roads don't get labeled. And if we need to, for specific maps, zoom in on certain sections, we can.
What is the importance of having the roads labeled or not?
Just
detail?
Yeah, level of detail, but we don't always label all of the roads, it's just so people can
But all the roads are shown,
Yes,
correct? Okay.
all the roads would be shown, it's just whether there's a name associated with the road. So sometimes we decide, hey, only major roads, and we're not labeling like private drives or kind of the smaller neighborhood roads. We can just label major thoroughfares. For simplicity, you could always go off of your zoning map, which I don't know if we have all of the roads labeled, if there are all of the roads labeled there. So, yeah, if we can develop one that has less roads labeled and see if it clears things up. Any other thoughts? And we can, continue to tweak. It's just we want to make sure that we have a good starting point as we start developing more maps. But we can continue to tweak as we go forward. Because as you add new layers, sometimes you realize, oh, we might need to make a couple tweaks here and there just to make sure that all the information is easily read and digested.
Is it overkill to take the roads off like you're saying, and maybe have this broken up in quadrants and then have detailed quadrants? Is that overkill? To take this over, this base map and then maybe make taking out the variable portion and having a quadrant of a detailed quadrant for each section?
We could do that.
Where's that?
It might be hard to see full picture. Elements, if, you're flipping through a map and you have to look at 4 different maps to be able to get an idea of land use in the township. But we could certainly split it up that way.
Or have a hole and maybe everything north of 322 is I'm just trying to think if somebody really wanted a little bit more detail, then you can do that. I just don't know if it's overkill to do that.
Right, and the other thing we've done in certain plans, this is just formatted 8.5 by 11 because it fits easily when you're printing out the document, and you can easily slot it in. But we've also done, and I think your previous plan was 8.5 by 11, but we can also do format it for like 11 by 17 is sometimes the next size up. But when doing that, then you would have to fold the pages in the final plan. And likely, so typically when we're formatting, we'll take the most relevant maps and insert them into the body of the comprehensive plan, but then in the appendix have all of the inventory maps that we produce throughout the process, so that there will be a section in the appendix that's just all maps. But if we reference a map in the narrative, in a chapter specifically, sometimes we'll pull that out and have it kind of inset into the text, so it might be a little smaller. Sometimes we work it into the text if we can. Sometimes it's a separate page that you're flipping through. I think lately we've been formatting the final comprehensive plan focused more on web viewing, just because typically people, if you post it on your website, that's mostly how people will see it. So when you put it inside text, you do have the opportunity to zoom in, as opposed to just looking at the printed document.
But 11 by 17 is much easier to see stuff, and if we have the Amish community who's, they're going to be looking at paper most likely.
Yeah, we can,
you can just see, you don't need every little detail,
Right.
but it's just much easier to figure out where you're at and what you're working with.
Yep. We can mock up 11 by 17 for the next meeting. We will start to be looking at inventory maps, so you'll have another chance to see what information will be on this map. I think at the next meeting, we would be discussing open space, natural resources, all that, so that's very layer heavy, especially when you get to the natural resources, when you're looking at streams and wetlands and all that. So that will be a good opportunity to see how much happens on these maps. And we can format them 11 by 17 and see if that works. And if not, we can try to split it up in a way that makes sense, and go from there. But we'll definitely make the adjustments that you suggested today for those maps. All right, any other comments before we move on? And feel free, you will all have my email, so if, something pops up, I always joke, if something in the middle of the night wakes you up and you have this desire to get a comment to me, feel free to email me any comments that just pop up after the meeting as we, as you digest this information. So the next portion, this is the key issue approach that I mentioned when reviewing the scope. So these are the key issues that we proposed in the scope of work. And we just want to, before we start the plan process, wanted to finalize these key issues, make sure that they make sense for both the township and the borough, that they address everything that you feel that this comprehensive plan update should address. So the first key issue is preserving agricultural landscapes, open space, recreation, and protecting natural resources. So in this document, I pulled out from the 2015 plan what chapters this key issue, so this would essentially be a chapter in the comprehensive plan. So it would be combining natural resources, agricultural preservation and land preservation, and parks and rec into this one chapter. So like I said, a little bit more of a higher level overview of those topics as opposed to having separate chapters for each section. So the previous plan chapters are listed underneath, and then the different goals that were in the 2015 plan that are relevant to this key issue. Some of the numbers are a little bit all over the place, but I think every single goal that was identified in the last plan does fit within the key issue approach. And every chapter falls under, it's just, we're not gonna have a full dedicated chapter to one of these topics. They'll be blended together. There are a lot of overlaps already with some of these things. So it's just trying to create a more streamlined approach. So the first key issue, like I said, is kind of looking at the agricultural landscape, open space, recreation, and natural resources, and how they all overlap, and how we can prioritize those different areas. The second key issue that we proposed is, we call it guiding growth, but it's looking at future land use, housing. The previous plan had a borough revitalization plan, so we would be proposing an update to that within this section. And then community services, so taking everything into consideration in that chapter. And then number 3 is discovering heritage preservation and interpretation opportunities. So this is kind of taking a higher level approach to looking at your historic resources and not only looking at those historic resources, but how to interpret those historic resources and how to make them more easily digested by the public and understanding and pulling that together of opportunities to interpret those resources. So that would be chapter 3. And then 4 would be expanding multimodal transportation. So not only does that look at traditional transportation and circulation, but it would also include trails, which you had separate chapters in the last time. And then the last one is resilience preparedness. So your previous comp plan had a section on energy conservation and renewable energy and sustainable development, or a goal identified for that. So this is where that would live, and we would look at developing resiliency and goals for that, as well as addressing energy conservation. So that is the last chapter. Does anybody have any thoughts on those key issues, the approach? Do you think there are any elements missing that we would need to add?
I don't know if it's a topic for the task force, but our biggest issue this past year, 2 years, has been county maintenance. Whether it's paving, potholes, crack sealing, or salt and ice removal.
And is that run through your public works department?
And
PennDOT, okay. So road maintenance at the PennDOT level. Which, yeah, I think that's.
I get it. Without the senator involved, I mean, it was almost non-existent.
Yeah. But I mean, that's certainly something, especially in a multi-municipal plan, you know, leveraging 2 municipalities sometimes can be, if you have 2 squeaky wheels talking to PennDOT about the same issues, sometimes you can get a little bit more leverage. So yeah, I think that would certainly fit within the multimodal transportation, and at least identifying that as an issue and, you know, brainstorming strategies.
What kind of goal would you expect from them? What would be a goal to solve that? Communication, response?
If it wasn't for the senator getting involved, I mean, it was non-existent. Our fire department, the last storm in February, had 8 accidents. You know, Katie Mew's been great with helping, but it's just, it's a big problem. You know, and it seems from the last meeting, like, PennDOT's invited us to take care of the roads that we need to. It's all about public safety. It's a real issue.
Topic-wise, one of the other unique ways that this topic can come up is through Chester County's updating their hazard mitigation plan right now. That's a 5-year process. They're doing that right now. It comes right after the completion of the Brandywine flood study, which everything that went into that was fed to the county for their hazard mitigation plan. So we've got an opportunity to pull some of those things out and reinforce them through this process as well. So I think timing-wise, we might be able to get some additional PennDOT attention. I don't say that naively.
Okay.
And certainly, through the hazard mitigation plan, once that, I mean, it might be completed during this process. So we would be reviewing that, and that would be funneling into the resiliency preparedness section, just to make sure. Sometimes when goals are identified in one plan and not in another, and you use the other one more often, you know, it's good to have all the goals in one place so that everybody can see them. So we would be doing that. We would also be reviewing the flood study, the Brandywine Creek flood study as it pertains to, because there was a lot of review and meetings that were done with the township and the borough on that, and a lot of analysis done through that process. So pulling in that stuff, as it pertains to flooding and regular damage to roads, we can kind of split between strategizing how to get certain things addressed, as well as strategizing how to prevent certain things from becoming worse, or developing a plan for repeated issues that occur, whether it's storms, flooding. There's a lot of tree wind damage that I personally experience where I live, with trees and power lines and stuff like that. So developing at least a plan for how to address that in either of those sections. Any other thoughts?
Is this heritage preservation, I mean, is that really a key point? We don't have a historic resource map, we don't have a historic commission, is that really necessary, I guess, in my opinion? To focus on that, we don't have any of those things, so.
I guess it depends on if you want that to be a priority. If you feel that it's important, or
I mean, the township doesn't have a historic commission,
Right.
There's no, like,
So who's implementing?
yeah, right,
who's
there's
doing
nothing
that?
really, there's nothing, it's not like when a historic resource, we have a historic resource map, and when somebody comes in and wants to make any type of alteration to a historic resource, exterior wise, they have to go to the historic commission. We don't have any of that here, so, I mean, I'm just saying from my own thought process, I'm like, I don't see that as a key element, because there's nothing being implemented anyway for that. So I don't know, like,
Would it be to begin that process of identifying a historic?
like they do have historic resources identified. When we were doing the zoning, the zoning update, there was a list of them, but at that time, everyone had agreed, like, it really wasn't like a priority. So I'm just asking, is it really a key thing to focus on when we really don't have, or is that something we want to focus on? I don't know.
I think the borough, I would wonder what was on that list for the borough last time, because we are old and we do have old structures there.
There was a lot on the list, but there's nobody to implement anything for that. That's my question. Like, or is it something that maybe you want to form a historic commission?
So the
That's
borough
question.
used to have one, and one is in talks forming back up.
Okay.
So I get it, but maybe right now, at least on our end, we just leave it on. Talk to the next borough meeting about it.
And I think that was why we thought it might be a key issue, because there wasn't any opportunity to advance some of those things. And it was one of those chapters or topics that had less information. And when we're looking at a comp plan, which is a 10 to possibly longer year planning horizon, maybe then getting some more resource and documentation and things that you can lay out and say, when over the next 10 years, is there a work plan that can advance some of those things? Is there things that the planning commission would benefit from having some enhancements on that? Or some of the interpretation of
So when we did the zoning task force, neither was like really interested in doing anything with that. That's the only reason I'm asking, because I don't want to focus on something, if it's not something that anybody really wants to,
And this is why, this is good feedback for that. And, as we start diving back in.
This is a different group of people too now, so.
Yeah, and it could be that as we start doing some of our base mapping and inventory, we start sharing that, we pivot from that being a key issue. Or you may say, what, yeah, there is something here when we are talking about 10 years out.
But as of right now, you're interested in maintaining that.
Yes.
And that could be something where the focus shifts a little bit more towards the borough and all the historic resources there, and then maybe the discussion at the township level into the historic landscape and that broader, you know, character of historic agriculture and that kind of thing. So whether it's, you know, whether a recommendation at the end of this ends up with the township forming a historic commission or not, you know, there are different ways to cover that actually get to the core of what, you know, the township is looking for too. But yes, as we go through the process, if there isn't a lot of meat to cover in that, we can always split it up, and perhaps the historic resources get couched in the borough's revitalization plan, as historic structures are key to kind of the downtown borough and, you know, the borough's character, because you're an old historic borough, and maybe the historic resources fall under the open space and scenic resources from the other chapter. So we can always split it up that way if there's not enough to cover in a chapter based on what we find. Any other thoughts? Okay. Then I think the last main thing on my agenda is identifying key stakeholders to interview. So in the scope, we have scoped out holding 10 key stakeholder interviews. Typically they don't always fall within a certain theme, but they can. So I just did a quick brainstorm. We usually include the school district within our key stakeholders. Then just brainstorming potentially the Chamber of Commerce. There were several nonprofits in Honeybrook that we can contact for any feedback that we want to hear. We typically interview TMAC for the transportation component, EMS, Honeybrook Fire, any others. I don't have any open space representatives on this list, land trusts or open space representatives, but we could certainly, I know the county is very involved in the ag preservation in Honeybrook, and then, like I said, we have a couple land trusts at the table, but we can always talk to others within land trusts that are, like other staff members that are active in Honeybrook, but just wanted to get your thought. And also, any of these, if it makes sense to, they can be kind of made into focus groups. If it makes sense to talk to EMS and the fire department at the same time, we can consolidate them if you want more interviews. But yeah, we have budget for interviewing 10 stakeholders. So we can always discuss adding more if you want to, but we would have to adjust the budget accordingly for that. Is there anybody that I'm missing that you think we should add?
What's the purpose of the interviews? Like, what are you asking?
Well, it would be whatever is relevant to that particular, so Honeybrook Library, for instance, they would be, as a community service, they provide a community service to the region, so getting any insights from them of needs that they see, anything that they think could be enhanced to help their programming, or any insights that they can bring just based on the service that they provide. So Honeybrook Fire Company, they might have some transportation difficulties accessing certain places, that this provides them an opportunity to provide that specialized input. They have on-the-ground knowledge that we don't have on, hey, this is a problem area for flooding, for instance, X, Y, and Z, or we're constantly needing to address this type of issue in this part of the township. So it's just another information gathering tool.
Basically, those other important elements of your community that aren't here at this table, they're not gonna probably come to the public meetings, so we want to give them special attention to provide feedback on this plan.
And they have specialized knowledge in certain very key elements of the plan.
Getting back to what you said,
So-
you call them road workers?
I was just gonna say, name the county manager of PennDOT or one of their senior project managers, the interview our police chief in the borough.
Very helpful.
Nonprofits, what falls into that category?
Well, I think the community partnership is, they kind of have, they represent a lot of nonprofits in the area, but a land trust could be a nonprofit, the food pantry, it's kind of,
So you're looking more at nonprofits that are service related rather than nonprofits that are nonprofit businesses?
I mean, businesses, if there are key businesses within the township, whether they're nonprofit or not, if there's a large business or a large landowner, that would be really pivotal to the plan.
Yeah, I mean, for example, we recently did a multi-municipal comp plan for the Unionville region, and our key stakeholder interview was Longwood Gardens. One of the largest landowners, we went and talked to Longwood Gardens. So, yes, if there are other for-profit that are significant impact because they're a major employer, or their footprint, or they're a user of roads, things like that are also important.
And why aren't the Amish and the agricultural community on this list? That's like the most important one.
They can be,
Okay.
yeah.
So, yeah, we will figure out how to communicate with the Amish. This is not unique for us to do comprehensive planning and how we engage the Amish. Fortunately, Conservancy International, there's other of us working with them robustly in other ways. We know that, at least on the open space committee, you have Amish plain set communications or participation. So
We do on planning commission as well.
Levi called. I think he might have had his times messed up. He called him just a little while ago, and I think he would have been here. Probably would have helped answer the question of how to reach out to.
And we've done stuff in other municipalities that have strong Amish populations. Sometimes we'll reach out to the bishops and see if there's a way. Usually they have been pretty active in other areas on survey participation when we have those paper copies.
Yeah, they can give them our church on
Mhm.
Monday.
We'll print a poster that we can put in some of the stores that they frequent, hardware stores, and the food shops. So, yeah, how to have a key stakeholder interview and get a good cross-section has been a challenge. So we've looked at that next level down, rather than having key individuals, we try to engage more of that community with specialized outreach.
Would it make sense, it's also a PA fishing boat for Struble Lake, and it's a large body of water, significant footprint.
Any others?
And what about churches and social services?
Are there specific social service groups to contact?
Well, there's the money for youth services. right?
Okay. there anybody on this list that you don't feel is worth?
Is Honeybrook Community Partnership a thing anymore?
It's on their website. I don't know how
I
active.
don't even know what they do.
They put on Harmony Day, stuff
I thought that was
that.
like fading, going away.
Volunteer, but
I don't know if it's
They're
worth.
they're trying to keep it going and react with volunteers, and, you know, it's,
Yeah, I just heard it was fizzling out. So I don't know if we want to waste one of our interviews with, because we only have 10, right, and then you're saying cost more.
Well, and we can consolidate some of these.
If we take a focus group approach with some of them, like Sarah mentioned, then we can, take a more lenient look at at what constitutes that.
What information are you looking for from them exactly, just what they think they need is in the community? Because I would like them to get, I volunteer there, so
Okay.
So like the chamber, is that one that you could group some other groups in with that? Like the chamber, the Lions Club, the service organizations kind of.
Is there active lines up? Okay.
And there's some, I think there's some other clubs too, that are kind of listed with that.
The American Legion.
Is that the one on 10?
323.
What's the one down on?
Just north of 10.
The Solid Temple, that's the line.
That's the Lions on south on 10, that has a Boy Scout.
Yes.
And would it make sense to kind of group, well, if we even decide we want to talk to Honeybrook Community Partnership, but kind of the services groups together, we could always group them, library, food pantry.
Yeah, I'd say group them together. I think another important one will be the Honeybrook NCMA, Northwestern Chester County Municipal Authority. It's a sewer authority that serves both the borough and township.
What was the name of that again?
NCCMA, Northwestern Chester County Municipal Authority.
That's just sewer and water.
That's just sewer. So the water is Honeybrook Borough Authority. I don't know how much the water goes out of the borough. Warren, do you?
Not much, I think it's mostly outward.
well, I guess they maybe lump it into community services.
Yeah, I do think the sewer authority with the growth and everything, it's top of the list.
Yep. Any others, and we can kind of, do you think these three could be grouped together, kind of EMS, fire, police?
Yeah.
Sometimes we want to make sure they play well together too, to make sure when you're pulling focus group people together that they'll actually all talk. But that will,
I think there should also be, it's not be better focus group, but seniors.
like contacting all the 55 and older HOAs or senior communities.
There's two retirement communities, there's
Okay.
one 55 plus that I know of. But there are other people that live in other parts of the community that aren't living in any of those communities.
Right, which I guess individual like residents hopefully will have the opportunity to complete a survey. So if there's not like a point person that can be representative of a
That's
group or
That's why I was suggesting that might fit better in a focus group.
The retirement communities.
Well, there are people that don't live in the retirement communities who are 65 and over and may have some issues, especially related to transportation, that people who do live in the retirement communities don't experience. They just have some separate issues.
Is there a senior center up there?
So I was asking the nonprofit because both of the retirement communities are nonprofits. I think Kettlewoods is for-profit. Tell us.
I know how it is.
Any others on here or not on here that we should try to get in contact with? And if they are, because we can certainly make targeted outreach to certain groups. Like if we don't have a representative from all the churches in a focus group, but we can certainly target all of them to send surveys and have kind of targeted public outreach materials sent to different groups. But are there any other stakeholders that we think need to be on this list? And we'll work internally on how to group and get it under. Right, well, I think we have a good starting point. And I think there might be, we can start on kind of pulling together. It might be that we reach out to a stakeholder and they're not interested in doing an interview, so that could happen as well. So we'll start trying to get contacts for different groups and refining this list, and then we can start moving from there. You might see it again at the next meeting, just a more refined format, but I think some of them we could begin reaching out to. So that is the last of what I wanted to cover. So I have questions and concerns, so I can open that up for the task force. And then before we get to that, I will just say our next meeting, so if we're sticking with the first Wednesday, will be the 6th. So the 6th at 6:30. So we have that on the book. And then I just have what we're going to be covering at that meeting listed here. But I will send out all the materials that we've begun to compile for that. And again, I'll identify what I'm planning on printing and bringing to the meeting, and what you might either tell me to print out for you, or if there's a lot of stuff to bring something to view things on. So with that, I will open it up. Because we didn't have a strategy in place for public comment, I'll open it up first to questions and concerns for the task force, and then we can open it up to the public for input, thoughts, etc.
Can I go back to the interview thing?
Oh, sure.
And I think it's a naive statement, but since we have like interview set up with the county manager and the rest of this, does it make sense to interview the county commission? Does it make sense to interview our local representative senators? I mean, because we have a lot of this stuff on our implementation, that's the part that's not even included, there on the last week. And it seems to me that a lot of this stuff, borough and township maybe can't handle. And it's gonna need higher up help, money or influence. At least, we bring the concerns to them, they know it, and, can help us or not.
Yeah, and I guess it depends on when you think that would be most helpful in the process. If bringing things to them early on, because the stakeholders would be, the stakeholder interviews is kind of information gathering, but if your priority would be, okay, here's the plan that we want to accomplish in the next 10 years. These are the things that the borough and township will need extra help on from representatives and, Chester County Council. Then maybe that's an element of the plan is saying, okay, once you have a finalized plan, maybe it's time to set up meetings with different representatives and kind of game plan or brainstorm what elements they could provide some support on, or you can use their leveraging power to accomplish. So it's up to, if there are particular questions that would be helpful to have them answer for this planning process, we can certainly include them in the key stakeholder interview. But if the priority is, hey, we need your help on these issues or these elements of the plan, maybe it's better to have that on the back end, or once you have an adopted plan. So then you could have something to bring to them and to point at and say, hey, we went through this process, these are important to us, how can you help?
So some of us have talked about this, I know Susan brought it up.
Yes.
Is it possible to go through chapter 13 of the old plan?
Yes.
The previous plan, and go through all the items that have been completed or not completed? And the not completed, we bring those forward to see if they want to get added to what we're currently looking at.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. I didn't have it on the agenda, but I included it in the meeting packet, and I have a couple copies here. So that is your homework for the next month. It might take a little bit longer.
And I don't mean to work on you, Warren, and your borough staff, but that's probably who should be answering this. I'm not sure if we can answer some of them, some of the items that were completed, but I think it's more of a staff item to look at and decide what's completed. I mean, we can give it a shot, but I think it'd be better if the staff would look at it and then decide if it's going to be incorporated in the future, into the future plan.
Well, I think the staff could certainly look at what's been completed if you have kind of a record of that. But then I think we would be looking at the task force to decide what should be included. And obviously we'll be working with township and borough staff to make sure what is being included is appropriate, but the task force.
I think the task force should determine what's there. I just meant the
Yes.
staff
To take a first.
to tell us what's done,
Yeah.
what's finished,
Yes,
or even comments as to, that's not possible. You're crazy if you include that. Yeah, I think the task force should be the one that
makes the decision on what,
along with you folks.
yeah.
And if we could get some input on those items that are ongoing, what has happened with that so far? I mean, in 10 years, what?
It's a good point, because I kind of wonder the metrics on success, or how you establish the metric for a goal. Is it a goal that's achievable? Is it a goal that's long range? I don't know what we were talking about, the historic preservation, it may not matter now, years, as long as there's a piece of the puzzle to add to it. I don't know.
And if it could be, not to get in the weeds, but if it could be a year that it should be completed, like completed within 5 years, because, the ongoing, medium in importance or current importance that is something to be done right away, there's no real timelines. The responsibility list is there, which seems to make sense, but there's just no real
Yeah, it's really
gate
vague.
to it.
Yeah, it's vague, like, oh, I.
And it's going to float, I understand that,
Yeah,
but
I see what you're saying.
like we were talking before the meeting, we were saying that if it was something that needs to be done in 5 years, then 5 years or 4 years, it's brought in front of the planning commission, if it's their responsibility to start working on it. It might help make everyone feel better about the items being taken care of and accomplished.
Yeah, so with this, I can work with, would I get in contact with, for the borough, Janice?
You get, Janice would go for it, I can send you their emails.
Okay.
We do have a very, if not that list, that's updated to the Borough Council. So
Okay.
I can easily get you that list for next meeting.
Okay. Then I'll just reach out to you and
Okay.
then, and Warren, I'll reach out to you, the go-to, and I will include you as well because you are our municipal liaison for the borough. So, I'll be in contact with you, just to, and it can be, at least as a starting point, checking things off or highlighting things and, red, yellow, whatever the method is to let me know. I think this is in PDF format, so however you want to convey what you've accomplished to me, yeah, I'll reach out.
I'll get an email to
Okay, great, awesome. All right, anything else? All right, any public comment? Yes, and, would you like to comment on
Anything else,
anything?
Janine?
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Valerie Schultz, Member Township. One of the stakeholders that I thought should be considered are the one of the electric utility companies. I don't know if it's PPL or PECO solely for this area, but it would be nice to know what the capacity is for the power grid and how any development could impact on that, because I keep hearing that our power grid is nearing capacity, and there's some issues with that, so I think it would be important to have them as a stakeholder.
Just to add to that too, Valerie, the NCCMA Sewer Authority is getting close. A solar panel company wanted to lease land off the authority and installing solar that would be hooked at now.
Okay.
So,
And along your lines with some of the big issues I think our community is facing, traffic safety concerns are some of the biggest. We have extremely narrow, windy roads, and we have more and more traffic that's impacting on these roads, and it's becoming a safety issue for Amish trying to travel in their buggies, and then it's also becoming a safety issue trying to get onto the main roads. The main roads are just non-stop traffic now during rush hour. And it's almost getting to the point where they're going to have to put, multiple traffic lights down the main tributaries just to get people to get on there. So I think that's been an issue that's been discussed from what I've been told, for a very long time, in figuring out the best way to get people onto the main highways. And then I think the other issue is there's rumors right now that our SEPTA coverage out to our area is going to be stopping
in the beginning of next year, and that could significantly impact on the traffic issues that we already have and that we're going to be facing with all the growth down 322 in the next year or two. So I don't know if they need to be a stakeholder as well. That's really going to impact on our traffic concerns. And what has been happening to date is all of these developments are coming in, and these developers are not expanding the size of the roads at all. They're crumbling. They're just way too small for the traffic that we're putting on them. Thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yes, could you put the files that you shown today up on the screen? Can you post them on the website, like in the agenda packet? We didn't have those available.
Yeah, we can post everything on, once we get our project website up and running, we'll post the materials from the task force meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? If not, I'll turn it over to the newly appointed chair to...
To do the best thing in the meeting, adjourn?
Yes.
I guess we need a motion and a second to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, thanks.
Thanks, everyone. I know. These meetings, you kind of leave with your head spinning a little bit.
I have some, but I have all the stuff packed up on the move, and I can't find it. Yeah, I know, but you're a
Find that card.